On June 25th, a day that might just mark a turning point in Kenyan history, a day that didn't just shake the pillars of Parliament, but may have forever altered the path of President William Ruto. Now, today on Lifelens TV, we're diving deep into this story. What really happened on this dark day, and why has it transformed the man at the helm of our nation into someone we might hardly recognize? A reverse baptism, they're calling it. Not by water or faith, but by fire.
Citizens of the Republic of Kenya was infiltrated and hijacked by a group of organized criminals.
June 25th wasn't just another day of demonstrations, it was a day when an affable, politically astute leader emerged with a newfound edge, a fierce response to an unthinkable breach. Some say this transformation echoes that of Kenya's second president, Daniel Arap Moi, who changed after the failed coup attempt on August 1st, 1982. Back then, Moi became a force unlike any we'd seen, turning to drastic measures like torture, assassination, and a network of spies to silence any voice of opposition. Now, the question many are asking is whether we're about to see a similar transformation in Dr. William Ruto. Let's go back to that day, June 25th. Parliament was invaded, set ablaze in parts, and Kenya witnessed something truly unprecedented. The president himself described it as a direct assault on Kenya's democracy, a disturbing breach of constitutional integrity. That evening, his statement was uncharacteristically firm, maybe even vengeful. He said, and I quote, "An otherwise legitimate expression of rights was infiltrated and hijacked by a group of organized criminals." There was no doubt in his voice, only an iron resolve. Despite his assurances that he remained in control, analysts began whispering that something fundamental had shifted. Was he feeling the pressure? Was he losing his governance mojo, as some critics put it? What's clear is this: Kenya is watching a leader who is facing massive challenges, political pressure, unfulfilled promises, economic strains, and a youth population that's growing increasingly impatient. The anti-government protests that began on June 18th to oppose the Finance Bill 2024 escalated. By the time he'd returned from the G7 in Italy, Kenya was in a completely different state from the one he'd left. Since then, his overseas travels have been limited. And where he was once active in State House with nearly 100 meetings by mid-June, that number has drastically dropped. June 25th changed everything, not only for the country, but seemingly for the man himself. But there's another layer to this story, one that many didn't see coming. The rift that June 25th ignited between President Ruto and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua. In our next segment, we'll look at how this event set the stage for a political standoff within the top ranks of Kenya's leadership.
Officers of the National Intelligence Service, officers of the National Police Service have told me in confidence.
But June 25th didn't just harden President Ruto. It also shook the foundation of his relationship with his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua. Once allies, now torn apart by suspicions and accusations, their partnership was stretched to its breaking point. In fact, the fallout was so severe that it ultimately led to Gachagua's impeachment. This wasn't just political drama, it was a purge. Security personnel even grilled some of Gachagua's closest aides, including MPs James Gakuya from Embakasi North and Benjamin Gathiru, also known as Major Donk, over alleged ties to the protests. The rift deepened when Gachagua publicly questioned why Kenya's intelligence agency, led by Nordin Haji, had failed to warn the president of the looming demonstrations. He demanded answers, asking, was it Gachagua who backed the protests, or was it former President Uhuru Kenyatta, or maybe even a neighboring country? Which is it? These words would be among his last public challenges before he was removed from office. And that wasn't the only sweeping change.
Of the Constitution and Sections 130, Sections 12 of the Office of the Attorney General's Act decided to dismiss with immediate effect all the cabinet secretaries and attorney general.
In a move that stunned the nation, President Ruto dismissed all cabinet secretaries, as well as Attorney General Justin Muturi. Only Musalia Mudavadi, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, was spared. It was clear that the president was making a statement. Loyalty would be paramount in his administration. But even as he tightened control, Ruto was wise enough to seek support from an unexpected ally, his former rival Raila Odinga. Yes, Raila, who many believed would remain in staunch opposition, was now a potential partner. Ruto reached out, and Odinga, now Kenya's candidate for the chairmanship of the African Union Commission, responded by nominating his trusted ODM allies for cabinet positions. We saw big names join the fold. Former ODM deputy leaders Hassan Joho and Wycliffe Oparanya, National Chairman John Mbadi, Opiyo Wandayi, and even Beatrice Askell from ODM's election board. It was a political recalibration like never before. But has Ruto truly changed, or is he simply adapting to the pressures of the moment? Some analysts argue that the president remains as steadfast as ever in his personal approach to power. Political analyst Martin Olu puts it bluntly. Anyone thinking Dr. Ruto learned anything from the Gen Z protests or rebellion is deluded. He remains focused on his own agenda and has only grown more resolute in excluding opponents. Yet others, like Jarvis Bigambo, argue that these protests have forced Ruto to re-evaluate his approach, to become more intentional about coalition building and internal unity. And Dismas Mokua adds that the Gen Z protests showed the president who his fair-weather friends were, friends who quickly took a back seat as only his most loyal supporters stayed close. This crisis has, in many ways, been an opportunity for Ruto to refine his administration. Some say he has used this moment, as former US public servant Rahm Emanuel would say, to never let a good crisis go to waste. He's cut back on initiatives like the Chief Administrative Secretary appointments, which could have drawn heavy criticism, and he's opened up space for true public participation. No longer a formality, but a necessity. On the economic front too, the June 25th protests brought changes. Faced with a public that opposed his proposed tax hikes, Ruto was forced to make tough choices. He's proposed significant budget cuts to bridge a 346 billion Kenya shillings gap, cutting 177 billion Kenya shillings from the fiscal budget and planning to increase borrowing by 169 billion Kenya shillings. It's a balancing act, one that could define his administration's future.
Was infiltrated and hijacked by a group of organized criminals.
For President Ruto, the aftermath of the Occupy Parliament protests has highlighted a stark shift from the leader Kenyans once knew in 2022. The shift became glaringly clear after his firm address on the evening of the parliamentary invasion, signaling a more uncompromising tone. Since then, accusations have poured in from the opposition, with claims that Ruto now rules with an iron fist. Despite his promises to uphold human rights, arbitrary arrests, disappearances, and security crackdowns have intensified across Kenya. The alarm is growing louder, and critics say his administration's actions reflect an emerging police state. It wasn't just the opposition raising red flags, though. Gachagua, before his removal, was outspoken about what he described as state-sponsored abductions and extrajudicial killings. During a press conference, Gachagua openly criticized the Kenya Kwanza administration, noting that despite reassurances from the police, there's clear evidence of these incidents happening. He admitted, "I'll continue to uphold what's constitutional and just, even if it means standing alone." But soon after, he was ousted by the National Assembly. The Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition has added its voice, with leaders like Kalonzo Musyoka, Eugene Wamalwa, and Jeremiah Kioni accusing the president of undermining constitutional rights. They demand his resignation, citing his oath to protect the Constitution and serve the public. Recently, human rights advocate Boniface Mwangi's detention, followed by his sudden release without charges, brought renewed scrutiny to the government's handling of civil liberties. We've seen mounting cases, Bob Njagi, the Langton brothers, and more disturbingly, the deaths of people like Denzel Omondi, a university leader whose body was found in a quarry. What are your thoughts? Do you believe national dialogue can address these pressing issues? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to Lifelens TV for more deep dives into Kenya's political landscape and beyond. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our updates. Together, let's keep exploring the stories that shape our lives.